Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. This is the show where I take a look at every classic Doctor Who story, one episode at a time, 1 day per week, plus a bunch of Big Finish. And today, on the 16th of February, 2018, we are taking a look at we are starting the final, I can't believe it, the final Patrick Troughton story, which is, of course, known as The War Games, with episode 1. What's interesting is that this one is written by Terrence Dicks, who is script editor, and Malcolm Hulke, who wrote co-wrote the Faceless ones. And we open with a very, very mysterious story. We open and it's World War I. The Dr. Jamie and Zoe land. They get accosted by they meet up with an ambulance. They get accosted by Germans, and they get sent to they get captured by the Brits again, and it's a lot of sort of running around and just sort of mimicking the chaos of war, which is done pretty well. And, you know, it's actually really, really, really a good, solid opening for the first, 10 minutes or so. There are a couple problems with pacing just in this episode in general, but other than that, just about everything sort of everything just sort of comes together to be a pretty good episode. You have the Doctor, you have the Dr. Jamie and Zoe. They essentially basically get when they get captured, they are court-martialed. Jamie is thought to be a deserter, and they eventually, Jamie, the Doctor, and Zoe are thought to be saboteurs. They thought they must have accosted this ambulance, and you just have this sort of thing that some really weird stuff is going on. Mainly that Lieutenant Casters and Lady Jennifer, two people that they meet, who were initially start as, really, really nice people, are like, well, they just listen to whatever their major says, and they don't really think, they don't even contradict him when it's obvious that, hey, this isn't really what happened. So that's one part that is really, really good, and you just have this mockery of justice where it's like, well, I say you're guilty, so you are, so we are sentencing you both to death. The Doctor gets locked up in military prison. Jamie gets locked up in the military prison, the Doctor is put in another cell, and then Zoe gets to stay with Lady Jennifer because she's a woman, and her feminine sensibilities, of course, wouldn't be able to take the man's prison, which allows her a chance to steal the keys and try to escape. But it's dawn, so the Doctor gets brought out. Zoe has to watch as he's put in front of a firing squad. They shoot, and the episode ends. That cliffhanger ending to the episode is amazing. Just because the fact that it's we're ending with, this, the Doctor is probably dead. How are they going to get out of this one? That doesn't make any sort of sense. The Doctor, he was shot. It wasn't this wasn't hey, oh, there's an easy way out. And everything like that is just, it's it's a really, really good, solid sort of opening. Just about everything is, everything is pretty interesting so far. You have just the Doctor's plot, but there's also a bunch of little details, soldiers not quite remembering, how long they've been on the front, that was a real thing that happened in World War I. But here it's just sort of used to be well, something more sinister is going on, because the Major in his room has some sort of technology, that's definitely from the future, not from the time period. It's from the far future, so something more is going on here. It isn't revealed what that is, but that's just a good mystery to set up the episode. Here's the setup. We have this whole thing, and that's the setup. We are going to be moving in towards the conclusion. My big problem is that, again, there's a little bit of pacing issues. you know, just other than that, though, it's a pretty good episode. So I'm going to give The War Games Episode 1 a 9 out of 10, because it's got that little flaws. It's a relief to have this after the Space Pirates. The Space Pirates was awful. It is the 17th of February, 2018, and I just finished watching The War Games Episode 2. The, of course, second episode of the story continues to be just as good as the first. But what I find a little more interesting is that, well, instead of just being an interesting story, this story actually it actually gives us some of the answers that we have been looking for. At least when it comes to the what has been going on in this story. We understand that something weird is going on there than originally thought to have been happening. Mainly, the cliffhanger resolves. Germans have invaded. So the Doctor is saved. He's locked back up in prison while General Smythe has to go to an important meeting. But General Smythe not only has a sort of a phone device in his room, he also has access to some sort of a teleportation capsule. And that's interesting. He continues to hypnotize Ransom, who is his lackey, I guess you could say. So you have so we have what is essentially we essentially have this story moving on to this getting more intrigue, as for some reason with you have our main characters. You have essentially our main characters. You have Jamie in prison, and for some reason there's a red coat with him. It's one of those things where it's like, well, where did that come from? It's not like it just comes out of nowhere. No, this red coat guy has been there. He gets thrown in, and the doctor is essentially like, well, this is a bit interesting, but we have everybody essentially there to give a final episode. You have the Doctor and Zoe essentially trying to bluff their way in. That fails, so Zoe just takes the commandant and whacks his head with a flower pot, which is hilarious. They get recaptured again by by Ransom, but then Casters and Lady Jennifer realize, hey, something's weird's going on, so they allow them to escape. And not only are they allowed to escape, but they take the ambulance, they escape. They're assaulted by artillery because General Smythe comes back and realizes, hey, you let them escape, Ransom, you idiot. And so they are assaulted by artillery. They disappear into this mist, and on the other side they seem to be in another time, as there's a Roman army going Um, Essentially, the Roman army is going forward them. So that is just, it's a really interesting episode. This gives, that's our cliffhangers. The Romans are coming to attack. That's sort of, there's not much else I can say. It's an excellent episode. So the War Games episode 2 gets a 10 out of 10. Alright, it is the 18th of February, 2018, and I just finished watching episode 3 of the War Games, and I have to say that this episode essentially builds up the story as a very, very good plotline overall. We have the cliffhanger resolution being that they end up driving back and escaping the Roman legion, and we never quite get we don't really get an explanation of who these Romans are. We just know that they're Romans for whatever reason. The Doctor obviously deduces that that General Smythe has something to do with this, as he seems to know too much, which is, you know, a pretty good way of continuing this. And that being said, the General, having his own way of things, also has, you know, being in control, gives us an excuse to get back to the chateau. We do eventually see the General making plans with a German officer, essentially to attack each other and try to outsmart each other, which is a very interesting scene. We also get to see them at a futuristic sort of base, which sort of reveals that some people are controlling the events of this story from up high. We don't really quite have an idea as to why, but we get this whole thing is building up to at least something interesting, and I think that it is doing a really good job of that. You of course have the Doctor being there and having his time to shine, while everybody else sort of goes on. You have the Dr. Jamie and Zoe and Casters and Lady Jennifer sneak into the General's room after a hilarious scene of tying up Ransom, the guy, you know, the General, like a mummy, which is hilarious. Which, you know, it's a hilarious scene, and everything just sort of, you know, builds to be just sort of the climax of the scene, and the scene just it does a lot of good for the story. We get the Dr. Jamie and Zoe definitely doing their best to try to figure out what's going on, and you have the Doctor trying to unlock this safe. Kester's is trying to basically get this, so the Doctor's gonna blow it up. Kester's is trying to get this corporal to get away from them. As soon as he gets away from him, it's too late, and the safe blows up, which is in just a comedic sequence, and it's hilarious. It all happens, you know, just in this perfect timing of just about everything. So we have this, you know, this great ending, and we have then we have everything move over to the German lines, where the Doctor they get captured by the Germans, and the Doctor has to convince them that no, we're from the future, in a hilarious scene. Like, you also get this lovely insight into Jamie, who's essentially saying that, you know, this war is nothing like the way war should be fought. It's an excellent episode. Before we actually get everybody, they're allowed to escape, and then because you have this guy Von White, who's also working with our villains, I guess. He's one of them. They get to the American Civil War zone. They hide out in a barn. It's going to be night. They decide, all right, we're going to sleep here for the night. In the morning, we're going to move on. And then we get the big reveal that one of the travel capsules appear. A bunch of American Civil War soldiers file out of it. There's a gunfight. The Doctor and Zoe go into the capsule and escape in it, while Jamie and Lady Jennifer are left behind, and that's the end of the episode. So, this episode is it's great. It is an amazing story episode, and, it really shows what the writers are capable of, and it builds on just the last two episodes, makes you intrigued for what's going on. So I'm going to give The War Games Episode 3 another 10 out of 10. Alright, it is the 19th of February, 2018, and I just finished watching Episode 4 of The War Games, and this episode just continues the really good streak by throwing us a curveball. It still throws us a series of curveballs. The first of these big curveballs is that these travel capsules, one, are bigger on the inside, and they travel very much like the TARDIS. The Doctor even mentions that he might know who's behind all of this, which is a really interesting prospect, because we're getting to a point where really it's the Doctor is really working everything out and, having his big deductions, just of like, okay, this is where things are going, this is where things are happening. Then the next big thing is, the German officer is also working for the American South. Jamie and Lady Jennifer get captured by Northern soldiers, who think they're spies. They convince them not them. They get hypnotized, think they do, they leave. And then the Southern soldiers show up, think, oh, you're totally fine. You're British, so you must be on our side. It's fine, which is kind of funny, because this is obviously taking place in, for Lady Jennifer, it's much later than the American Civil War. And for that, for Jamie, he's much earlier. But Jamie then is like, no. And everything just sort of builds on that idea. And it's a very, very interesting thing. Like, you have a lot of questions being asked about, like, hey, is what's going on really all that correct? I mean, we can't really tell very much. We know that things are happening, but what are these implications? Are they like just, are they, what sort of implications are they? So you have that, and then you have the Doctor and Zoe's, their plot ends essentially when a bunch of resistance members, people who are basically going against whoever running the titular War Games, show up and, save Jamie and Lady Jennifer, because it's like, well, you must be on our side because you obviously understand this whole idea of changing time zone, which is, it's all really clever. Like, everything is really starting to come together in this episode, and I think that's just great. You have Casters who was captured, so you have him essentially being not only just being captured, but he is taken to be reprocessed, and he happens to meet up with the Doctor and Zoe, who put on these glasses and basically act like they're students observing the war, like just the war games. It's like, yes, we are observing things, and we get introduced to this guy, the war chief, the security chief, and like the chief scientist. We get introduced to quite a few of our villains in this episode, and we're 4 episodes in, and we are just now really getting our villains. I think it's testament to Terrence Dicks and Malcolm Wilkes' talents as writers, just because you really, it doesn't really feel like it's been that long. It feels like this story has been pretty short, yet we're not even halfway through yet, which is really interesting, like just an interesting aspect of the story, in my opinion. So you have Caster's reprocessed. It's like, what do you see? Oh, well, I'm back in the War Office, and those 2 are German spies. So you have the Doctor and Zoe on the run, get on the run again, and there's a call out for them. Casters meets up with Zoe, points his gun to her head, and fires, and bam, that's our cliffhanger. So, yeah, this is just an amazing story overall so far. So I'm going to give The War Games Episode 4 another 10 out of 10. This has been a really good streak of episodes. Hopefully that this can maintain it. I'm afraid it might not, just because it's a 10-episode script. But yeah, another 10 out of 10 for The War Games. All right, it is the 20th of February. Sorry, I almost forgot what day it was. The 20th of February, we are at 2018. Sorry, I am just a little bit on the tired side right now. If you couldn't tell, I happen to have a rather long day ahead of in my life. So yeah, that is something. But I am back. We have War Games episode 5, and it's an episode that does quite a bit of interesting things, at least in my opinion. This one, I feel slowly loses a little bit of the momentum that the other episodes have been giving on. Mainly, we get this much more information with the war chief, and this episode is more dedicated to, I guess you would call it political squabblings. It's probably the best way to describe it. Essentially, the war chief, the security chief, and the chief scientist all have their own goals in mind, and they're basically trying to I guess you could say out-villain each other, really. That's an interesting way to start this. We have them trying to out-villain each other. There's a lot of stuff that's like, hey, we are, this is a story that we're, that things are going for, and, as such, the story, the story continues on. You have the doctor essentially convincing the chief scientist that, oh no, I'm with you guys, like, I really am, trust me, I'm a good guy, I would never do anything evil or anything, so, that's something that's a little bit, just a little bit on the interesting side. So you have the doctor and company, building up, the doctor building up his stuff, his knowledge. Zoe gets interrogated, and they realize, hey, for some reason the security chief realizes, hey, she's from a different time, and that, I'm sorry, but that doesn't make much sense. So you sort of have you have just this building, you have things building, so it's, just a story that, we have essentially we have everything going to what could be described as a conclusion, but it's not at all concluding. We haven't got it. We have Zoe being found out as the security chief does his thing. You have the doctor rescuing Casters, and you have Jamie and Lady Jennifer essentially going through and trying their hardest, basically, basically going through things and having them as, basically having things go through just the regular channels. Jamie gets this great scene where he basically convinces the leaders that, hey, the resistance, that, hey, you really shouldn't be trusting, everybody, because, things aren't quite what they seem, which is interesting, to say the least. and you just sort of have Jamie filling his role. There's a point where he tells Lady Jennifer, "Oh," you sort of have him, the sort of who he really is as a character, come through as he's like, "Oh, I don't think, Lady Jennifer, you should be coming on this mission, because you're a woman," which is it's done in just this comedic way that, like, "Oh, Jamie, you get yourself." Jamie ends up getting himself. He ends up getting himself hurt, which is, it's hilarious. I think Jamie, he's got some of the best actions in this story overall. So he's really great. The only problem is that the pacing is really started to slow down. Not as much plot has happened. Hopefully it'll pick back up. So I'm going to give the War Games episode 5 a 9 out of 10. Alright, it is the 21st of February, 2018, and I just finished watching episode 6 of the War Games, and if I may, this is probably the weakest episode so far. But that's mainly because this story has been setting a high standard, and we seem to just start having this little bit of slowdown. Mainly in terms of plot, we're just doing more runaround stuff. We are deepening the villain's characters, which I will say, good job. It's actually really solid. Thank you, Terrence Dix and Malcolm for doing that and actually giving the villains some sort of actual character, and generally being good to the villains of the piece, instead of just letting them be underdeveloped like many Doctor Who villains are. So yes, good job for them. That being said, Malcolm Hulke and Terrence Dix also have the main problem of, again, not really doing too much for our regulars, except trying to start moving pieces together and trying to give them a give them a give them stuff to do, and get them to where they need to be for the story to really progress as a story. However, there is a problem with that, and that is mainly that as a story, it's not really to progress. We have quite a lot to move forward. We have a lot to do. It's taking a lot of time, and we really have just this idea that things could probably be going a little better in some aspects for the story, but it's taking time. The issue is that this story takes a lot of time, and the time spent on it is it's starting to drag just a little bit. I love the War Chief as a character. He's a really funny guy, and he's got quite a lot to do in this story, and he does it with he's just a hilarious guy, and you have this very very long sort of story, and a lot of it really brings itself as a story to its fullest conclusion, and we have a really good set of cliffhangers. Like, the cliffhanger is really good. Like, it's It's a... I'm sorry, I lost what I was doing. And, you know, it's one of those ones that everything sort of is trying to come together, but we really don't have a place to go for it. So yeah, it's really good. So I'm gonna give the episode an 8 out of 10, just because it's a great episode, and the cliffhanger is good with everything compressing in on itself. But this is just, it's sort of this explanation episode that I don't think quite lives up to its potential. Alright, it is the 22nd of February 2018, and I just finished watching episode 7 of the War Games, and this episode, I am happy to say, returns a little bit of the strength that, at least I would say, that episode 6 lost. We aren't back to the heights of the early episodes of this story, but we are moving in a good direction. Mainly, we have this big reveal that that the war chief is one of the Doctor's own people, which is just the last time we saw one was of the Doctor's own people was the meddling monk in what was that story? That was all the way back in the Daleks' Master Plan, another really long story. And, you know, having that sort of a connection to the Doctor, I think helps the story out quite a bit, that we sort of have this feeling. It allows the villains to be complex, because obviously the villains are different species. The War Chief seems to have built the villains side rats, which I'm pretty sure is just TARDIS spelled backwards. I don't know if we know what they stand for, but they mentioned that they're called side rats in this episode, which I think is interesting. Also, in the same scene that I noticed quite a bit of the direction. This story was directed by David Maloney, who does an excellent job. He's been doing a great job. From the start of the story, I just didn't mention it because I didn't feel the need to. So, yeah. It is... it is one of those really, really good, episodes that it has a little flaw. We have just this little bit that is just a little too slow in places for this episode overall. We get introduced to the War Lord, who is the leader of these aliens, and you just have a lot of stuff comes down to the fact that a lot of the stuff happens to come down to just this just the fact that everything sort of comes together is really, really good. It is how do I describe it? It's a story that just sort of knows how things sort of end together, and I have to say that the entire episode does an excellent job of just doing it. So I am going to give the War Games episode 7 a 9 out of 10 because it's really, really good. We are very, very close to the end, to getting back to the 10 out of 10. But yeah, I'm going to leave War Games episode 7 at a 9. It is the 23rd of February, 2018, and I just finished watching episode 8 of the War Games, and this episode continues on the very high streak of good episodes and gets us back to essentially where the story was at the very beginning of the story, with that really, really high quality of episodes. We have a lot of stuff happens. You have the Doctor being captured, and being split up from the group, which, you know, you have more splits being made in the allies of the Warlord and the War Chief and the Security Chief and the Chief Scientists and General Smythe. General Smythe has this hilarious thing where everyone ends up taking over the French place, and essentially, it's like, right, I'm going to shoot you, Doctor. Then it turns out, oh wait, the Doctor's the only one who knows where the time machine is, so ha ha ha, I win. It's one of those just sort of hilarious little moments where our heroes are victorious because of incompetence before everything starts to go crazy for the villains, which is really good. That's a really, really good way of doing it. It feels pretty natural overall. The Doctor and company are all really, really solid when it comes to what they have to do. You have everybody. You have everybody essentially coming together for one big final battle, and everything just, sort of has its moment to shine before anything bad can happen. Like you have every character has to sort of do their part to make the plot work, which is really, really good. That is one thing that I think that Terrence Dicks and Malcolm Hulke do an excellent job of portraying, and that is just, it's really a really solid story. So overall, like, the episodes know how to build on each other to create tension and bring us to a conclusion, mainly. And we have this the cliffhanger I want to talk about at the very, very end of this, just because it's a very, 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 very important cliffhanger in terms of the story. Like, everything changes after this. We have the name that the Doctor species are Time Lords, which is, we're just getting so much, I guess you could say, Doctor Who mythos established in this one story. And of course, with what is to come, that shouldn't really be a surprise. But this is just, the episode itself is just, overall, it's great. You have Jamie and Zoe are great. They have to convince Arturo Villa that, like, we know what he's doing. But here's the thing, because Villa doesn't believe in women being in charge. Jamie is the one who has to convince him, which is just, it's amazing. It's really, really good. It was a very, very, very good episode overall. And you have just the big conclusion where the Doctor comes and is like, all right, guys, we're going to storm their base. I figured out how to do it. And then, psych, I've actually betrayed you. And that's our cliffhanger. That's where we end the episode, which is just, that's enough to make it, just sort of a good story. You have the feeling that everything is going to be falling apart because of this big revelation that the Doctor isn't a good guy anymore, and you just want to know where it's going. So, that is just enough to keep me intrigued. So I'm going to give The War Games episode 8 a solid 10 out of 10, and hopefully the last episodes can keep this level going before the story's over. Alright, it is the 24th of February 2018, and I just finished watching episode 9 of The War Games, the penultimate episode, and this one continues to build up the tension as we lead up to the conclusion in episode 10. Mainly, the episode does a lot of work to try to basically be the best possible story it can be, as we basically have everything falling into place before we end everything. You have the Doctor basically. He isn't really betraying his friends. He is not. He's not a traitor, and he would never ever do something like that. Which is really, really good. The bait and switch was a pretty clever idea. This episode actually sort of ends a lot of the animosity for the villains. It's one of those really, really good sort of episodes that just brings everything together into a nice conclusion. You have the Doctor and company, really, really working to get everything to, basically be, the big conclusion. And, it really works. The stories really work to create something that, everyone can enjoy. Like, it's, you have the Doctor, Jamie and Zoe, really having their chance to shine in the spotlight as they basically try to save everyone, yet end up really, I don't want to say saving no one, but yet they essentially save no one in the end, just because it's it's something that they can't do it. They end up, there isn't. A lot of the point of this is that you can't save everyone. The Doctor actually, for a lot of the episode, is trying to avoid having to call on his own people to step in, but in the end, that's what he has to do. Like, I don't want to say it's heartbreaking, but it is kind of heartbreaking, because you really feel that the Doctor could possibly do this on his own, and we wouldn't have to do everything. Like, and he's you have the war chief essentially being, everyone betrays everyone in this story. This episode, it's sort of I would call this episode just an episode of general betrayal, because everybody is sort of just like, well, we can't we can't do this, so I'm gonna betray you, you're gonna betray me. It's really it's really clever, actually, that everyone betrays everyone. You have the war chief attacked by the Time Lords. The Time Lords essentially take over. They take over everything, and they're like, all right, we took over everything. You, however, you don't get the choice. You really don't get the choice. It's, you have your last chance, really, to save everybody involved, and you can't, the war chief, he disappears from existence. The warlord gets captured. You have Arturo Villa, who essentially tries to kill the Doctor several times, because he thinks, oh, you betrayed us, and not just you betrayed us, but you betrayed us, and now I'm going to kill you, even though because your machine doesn't. He basically is like, right, I've made it with the machine work super effective. I will demonstrate on Jamie, who happens to be someone who I came here with. Hint, hint, Jamie. And Jamie, of course, pretends to be Scottish and plays along with the Doctor's sort of well, see, it worked on him, which, generally makes sense, because it's like, hey, it worked on my closest friend, which is, I find, really, really funny. So, that is funny. And then Villa's response to that is just like, oh, your machine doesn't work on me because I am Arturo Villa and I am amazing. And, that's also really funny. It, like, just the character doesn't quite get that. No, it's a ruse. We're we're trying basically to trick everybody that, into thinking that, hey, I'm really on their side, even though I'm not. Which is, it's a really clever trick, and the Doctor does, and Jamie pull off amazing, and that happens a couple times, and then the cliffhanger is the Doctor telepathically sends the cube. They escape. Our TARDIS escapes, and they're running towards the TARDIS. The Time Lords are slowing down time, and essentially, our crew is captured. Pretty much, we don't really, we don't really have. We have a lot of things. We don't really have things that are like, right. This is definitely ending everything. So you might, the Doctor may end up dead after this. So I'm gonna give the War Games, Episode 9, the penultimate episode of Patrick Troughton's run. I can't believe we're actually nearly close to the end of Patrick Troughton's run, because the cliffhanger was just amazing. The episode itself, the War Games Episode 9, will be receiving the highest score of a 10 out of 10. Right, it is the 25th of February, 2018, and I just finished watching Episode 10. The final episode of the War Games, and this may be one of the best episodes of Doctor Who ever. This episode, it's a story of two halves. The first half is, the Doctor, Jamie, and Zoe trying to escape the Time Lord's clutches. They set the TARDIS down on the sea. The Time Lords drag them under the sea and get attacked. He tried to go somewhere safe. Alligators. They go deep space. Well, they get suspended in space, and that clip from the Web of Fear replays. So then they just get dragged against their will, mind you, to the planet of the Time Lords. They don't have a choice. This is the story where the Doctor's past catches up to him in a very, very big way. Like, he does not get a happy ending at all for this. Like, it's everything just ends badly. After they make it to the planet of the Time Lords, of course we'll know it as Gallifrey later. It's not actually named as such in the episode, which I think is that's an interesting thing, that they don't actually call it what it is. The Doctor and company, they have to testify at the trial of the warlord who has some of his people come to try and essentially some of his people come to try and get him out, but they don't work, and they find him guilty, and the Time Lords write him out of history, which, I'm sorry, that's just a really, really, really creepy thing. Like, that's not something that would normally happen. Like, it's just a very, very creepy way of going about things. Like, no, we're just going to kill you because you screwed up. You don't have the right to live anymore. So yeah, that is, I'm sorry, that's just, it's a very, very it's a very scary thing overall. Like, it's, I don't know how you could really how you could really get the get everything like that, but it's really good. The episode itself is really, really good. Like, you have that which is scary, then we move right on to the doctor's trial. They try to escape, but they get captured again. Jamie and Zoe both get sent home. They get sent home, and they aren't allowed back. They lose their memory of everything. So they lose their memory. Then the doctor gets he gives this amazing speech that has to fight evil in the universe, and the universe and the Earth needs protection. So they decide, right, we're exiling you to Earth. You are not gonna be allowed to basically have time travel. You are going to be put in Earth, and you are going to be forced to change your appearance. And that's what they do. That is just an amazing ending for the story. It's really good. So I'm gonna give the final episode of the War Games again a 10 out of 10. Of course, brings us to the end of the War Games and averages the 10 episodes to a score of 9.5 out of 10. Thank you, everybody, for watching this final episode of the Patrick Troughton Years for the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. It's been a long road. We are moving right on to the Third Doctor with his introductory story, Spearhead from Space. But before that, of course, we will have our Second Doctor retrospective. So be on the lookout for that. Thanks for watching. Thank you all for watching. And please leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you next time when we do this first Third Doctor story with Spearhead from Space.